Good evening, good evening, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 943. This is for the 12th of February, 2024. James Spann here. This is the pre-show, the magical part of the program where we typically do three things, or we try to do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and from time to time, we say outrageous things. If you're looking for the actual show content, move the slider over about 10 minutes. All right, 10 minutes. And let's see, we got some folks already waiting to get in. They're knocking on the door. I was going to get cranky again about the past couple of days and the weather that's going on down here. We've basically had a kind of a severe weather no-show, and all the haters are after me again. And that's okay. And again, I say this all the time. You absolutely cannot hurt my feelings because I have no feelings left to hurt. But so many of these big corporate entities are mandating that the meteorologists declare code red weather emergency first alert days. Tornadoes, floods, you name it, we've got it. And again, down here, severe weather was a no-show, and somehow they equate all of that with me. And I am not blaming the meteorologists with these stations. They have to do this. They don't have a choice. And somehow they just equate that with me, and they all come after me. Hey, man, you declared a first alert code red emergency weather day, and nothing happened but rain. And so,
That's good.
it's just like I don't. And again, I obviously they're trying to increase viewers, but if you declare code red, emergency first alert, warn days, or whatever they are, every time it rains or there's fog or something, you just people are going to get sick of that. They already are, and they come after me. And I am very thankful that my folks here do not mandate that I do that. And just a word, listen, if you're a corporate news director, a corporate somebody, please consider the negatives of this. This will not end well. If everything is a code red emergency first alert day, I'm declaring tornadoes, floods, fires, locusts. It's all happening. So anyway, that's my rant, outrageous story of the week, and I'll just stop there because I'll get in trouble if I keep going. Uh, all right, we got Bill Murray on here. Is that a raincoat you're wearing?
Yeah, it rained today, James.
Well, it was a
Rained a
first
lot.
alert code red emergency day. I mean, yes.
It's a cold yellow alert weather whatever day.
There you go. Um, so I see Kathy is with us, but I don't see her
So we
video and I
need her
don't hear
camera.
her audio.
Yeah, she's muted.
Looks like she's got both of them turned off. And the truth is, after she just dialed into this, I don't blame her. I would turn mine off and run. I would run as far as I could run. Um, so maybe, let's see. I know that Jen is out tonight. I think Rick and Kim and Neil will be back with us tonight, which will be good. Of course, Bill's been away for a few weeks on a pub
I
crawl,
know. It's
crawling
been
the
terrible.
pubs,
I missed
crawling the
WeatherBrains.
pubs.
Where was
Uh,
I? I was flying back from Sacramento last Monday night.
um,
I got a wild hair and decided I would ride an Amtrak train through the Sierras during a blizzard. It was very fun.
what do you mean? That's not a wild hair. That's a logical choice. I mean,
I
that's
thought so too. So
very,
it
very
could not have
logical.
been more perfect, James Spann.
Um,
95-mile-per-hour winds, full blown snow. You couldn't see. And you dropped down 2,000 feet and it was nothing.
it's no better than that. No better than that.
It was pretty fun. And thank goodness for the Union Pacific. I guess it's the Union Pacific Railroad for keeping that track over Donner Pass open. Because you could always run into a situation where they cancel the train. And they did not let that happen. They were good old time railroaders, like Kathy's father was. He worked for the Southern Pacific. I think we're going to find that out in a second if we can get her untracked here.
Hey, Bill, my grandfather was a telegraph operator for the Rock Island Railroad in Arkansas.
Oh
And
my goodness.
I have his key at
You
home.
do not. That's so cool.
I've got a side to side key and a vertical.
Da 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 da. Now, if it's a ham radio operator watching or listening to this, you should know what I'm doing here. Da 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 da. What is that? You guys know? CQ. When you're looking to make another contact on ham radio, you send out a CQ. And if people want to talk with you, they respond. And that's how you initiate contact with people via ham radio. Now, sometimes you call CQDX. And if you call CQDX, you're looking for a foreign country, somebody not here in the United States.
There's Kathy and Ralph, James, right there.
Yeah. Can you hear us?
Yeah, we hear you loud and clear, and your
good.
video is beautiful. I knew our test went beautifully on. When did we do that? Saturday or was it Friday? I can't remember.
Friday.
Friday.
So do we get to be a weather brain now? Now that we're
That's
on
what
with
you are. You are the weather brains tonight.
Okay.
If you hang in here for 1 hour, you deserve to be a weather brain. You deserve some kind of trophy. To put up with this foolishness.
I don't know if you met Ralph, my brother. Can you see him?
No. Hello, Ralph. Yeah, he looks great.
Yeah. Okay. Did you look great?
What does your hat say, Ralph?
This is a memorial to the Boy Scouts.
Oh, okay.
They got the Tucson's Lost Tragedy on one side and their names on the other.
Wow. Well, we're so honored to have y'all talk to us tonight. Which railroad did your father work for?
The Southern Pacific.
Southern Pacific. And
Ralph, you got a good looking head.
43 years myself here.
you worked for the railroad for 43 years? Wow. That's fabulous. So James, say that again. You had a compliment for.
No, I just said he's got a good looking head. See, but Bill and I have potholes. Our heads are lopsided with potholes. You have a good symmetrical head. It's a good look. So we're jealous.
There used to be a study in criminology about, heads. What was it called? They studied your head, and certain patterns appeared. You might be more prone to being a certain kind of criminal. So I probably
don't need to know about that. I don't want to know. No, I mean, some of these guys, they shave their head and it's just a perfect, spear. It's just perfect. And if I shave my head, you'd see every pothole. My head's lopsided. It's not symmetrical. The whole thing's just not right. So I leave it covered with fuzz so nobody can see a lot of that.
Well, I've heard that if you're bald in the front, you're a thinker. If you're bald in the back, you're a lover. If you're bald all over, you think you're a lover.
Yeah. Man, we need to get that writer on this show for some better material. That's not bad. And just for you two, we are live on YouTube. We like to disclose that to our guests so that you're not that you would say anything inappropriate, but we're live on YouTube, and we'll hit the local television here in 2 minutes. And then most people listen to the audio version of this, which is released tomorrow morning. But we have a subset that will watch live. So we're live on YouTube right now.
I'm glad you brought that stranded streamliner up, James A. I actually saw the place where it was stranded.
Really?
On this route, yes, and it was spectacular. And,
that is beautiful country. I mean, absolutely gorgeous around Tahoe.
You put about 10 feet of snow on it. It was even more spectacular. And I found the place I want to live, Truckee, California.
Yep. It's beautiful. I mean, it's stunning. We spent half our honeymoon there. So
it was a beautiful little town. Looked like it had a lot going, and I could
big enough, close enough to Reno.
Yeah, you could hop the train and be in Reno in 2 hours or less.
Sacramento.
If the honeymoon doesn't work out, you're close to Reno.
Exactly.
You can get a quickie divorce. Yeah. Do they still do those?
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Quickie marriage or a quickie divorce, either one. But yeah, and then I got off the train in Sacramento to fly home the next day, but was greeted by 67-mile-per-hour winds, and they were all going crazy in downtown Sacramento. I literally I stood there waiting on the Uber, and my computer bag just started rolling,
Oh,
and it got about halfway down the block before somebody rescued it for me. It was crazy weather.
All right, here comes Rick and here comes Neil.
Oh, good. Hello, Rick. I saw you in Fort Worth.
Yep.
Hello, Dr. Neil. Right
Yeah,
before I
seemed-
vamoosed for Salt Lake City.
Yeah, seen very briefly, but it was good to see you there. Good to see a
There's
lot of
more of
people
you.
there.
It was very
This
fun.
was the Storm Chaser Summit.
Yeah, it was fabulous. Had how many, Rick? 560? Was that the number?
Yeah, well over 500 record crowd. They sold out, so
Had
good
a
turnout.
fabulous panel with some survivors from Rolling Fork and a couple of
Yeah.
chasers. It
Yeah,
was very moving. And Rick, of course, had a great talk.
yeah, got
And
some
the-
good
and the-
reaction
the-
to it. I was pleased that it was well received at a talk on mental health, and it's a different kind of weird topic for a bunch of storm
Trying to
chasers
even
and
us
weather
up.
geeks, but important. So I got lots and lots of
Yeah,
good
we're
feedback
kind of even now.
afterwards.
Yeah.
Hey, y'all
All
are
right, so
balanced and
let's get this
symmetrical.
show started. Welcome to our television viewers. We're at the top of the hour. This is the Monday night weather party. The weather has calmed down, so we're good to go here. So we're going to record track 1 and we're going to record track 2. And here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Join the American Meteorological Society by becoming a member of the band. The AMS Weather Band is a global community of weather enthusiasts dedicated to learning and sharing their love of science. Visit amsweatherband.org to learn more and join the band today.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
You heard it from Bill Curtis. Some believe we're kind of a big deal, but we're probably not. Whatever. This is Weather Brains, episode number 943, the weekly show all about weather. We just celebrated our 18th birthday here on Weather Brains. We started in January of 06. Glad you're here. And look who's back from the Chaser Summit, his ramblings. Rick Smith. Rick, I understand you had a fun time in Fort Worth at that event.
Yeah, it was a great event. I think that's the third one I've been to, second year in a row, and it was really good. Much bigger crowd. I think they had over 550 or so. Don't know how many people were online, but they had so many they sold out. The facility in the room could only hold so many. So lots of good talks. Probably the highlight for me was there was a panel discussion on the Rolling Fork tornado. And it wasn't just storm chasers talking. The cool thing about the panel was they had 4 people that had survived the tornado, 3 people that had actually been buried inside a Mexican restaurant there in Rolling Fork, and one poor guy that was the husband and father of, or the husband of one of them. I can't remember for sure, but man, there was a lot of sniffling and reaching for Kleenex going on in the room. That's always so powerful in their stories about what they went through. And people have different opinions of storm chasers, but there's zero doubt that those chasers that rolled up on that scene within seconds after the tornado ended, there was no fire department in the city at all. They just don't have one. So they were it, and they saved lives. They really did. And hearing the kind of the testimonials from those people that were there, they couldn't even keep from crying. So it was something else, right, Bill?
Yeah, Eric Fox, the gentleman who organized the summit, was on WeatherBrains back in early January, and he was one of those chasers that came upon the scene. And of course, his military background and police training allowed him to take charge because, the people that are there, they hear their family members buried in the rubble and they want to help, but they don't know what to do. So they're making things, in some cases worse, by getting up on the debris or whatever. And he just took charge, and boy, that family just revered him. And they asked the question, Rick, and I heard them say, what can we, what can we as a chaser community do to help you prepare for next time? And they said, we just want to know where you are, because if you're coming to our town, we're getting underground. But it was a very moving experience because, as Rick said, one of the ladies was actually holding up a giant freezer, or the wall of a freezer that was crushing her. So they had to find a way quickly to get her out from under that. And as Rick said, they saved lives. It was just amazing. But there were a lot of people who didn't make it, and that's another thing. Chasers coming up on situations where they encounter people who didn't make it, and that's traumatic and heartbreaking. I think for me the highlight of the event was Skip Talbot did a spectacular thing on those two chasers that got hit by the tornado in April in Illinois that they were chasing, and they gave him all of their GPS locations and all of their footage. He synced it all together, and then showed what they could have done differently. And it was like extremely important lessons for all of the chase community, for any of us that get to do that, of not making those same mistakes, because a tragedy just was inches away. You probably remember that video where the grain silo rolled over the car, and one of the other cars was flipped several times. So they're just lucky to be here. And you could have heard a pin drop in the room when they were playing the audio of these chasers literally praying for their lives because they were petrified. And
It was
so
amazing.
it's fantastic knowledge right there that I'll always remember if I'm ever chasing Rick.
Yeah, that was kind of I don't want to say gut wrenching, but it was stressful just to
It
know
was.
that. And you can't Skip Talbot cannot be beat for his analysis. He did a similar thing for 2013 El Reno and syncing up the radar, and it's just amazing. And you can see very easily where mistakes were made and how simple movements, simple decisions that would have been a little bit different could have changed their outcome. But it was painful. What seemed like to go on forever when they were in the tornado or in the whatever the winds were that were just never seemed to end. That was just hard to watch. But they all survived, thank goodness.
Yeah, the tornado had reached a size of about a mile and a half. The tornado vortex, I think, is what Skip called it. But they were in that for well over a minute and a half, and it just seemed like it would never end. And yeah, you really felt for those guys. But one of the most important lessons was the first thing my grandfather ever taught me about a tornado. And that was, if you can see it moving, it is going to miss you. And they claimed, several times they were like, it's coming right for us. It's coming right for us. But it wasn't. It was actually moving. They were just too upset to, stop long enough and focus and realize by some frame of reference that it was moving from right to left, because they were in the bear's cage. They were literally in the worst part of the worst place they could be. And in both cases, they let the tornado come right to them. So it was great that they shared that information and, and openly, talked about it and let him critique what had happened, because it wasn't to shame them or, make fun of them. Certainly not. It was to learn from it, so we don't let it happen again to other chasers. So I don't know if the things are going to be recorded, but I hope we get to go back and watch those. So anybody that didn't get to go, because it's very valuable information. Sorry, James, we just kind of took over the show there, but
No, this is
thought that was
great
important
stuff.
stuff.
It's great stuff. Let's go up the road from Rick to James Adelot. He's working the blizzard of 24 in Tulsa. How much snow did you get?
I had to get into chat because I did not believe the CLI that came out at 4:30, but we had about officially in Tulsa 1/10 of an inch of snow. I probably had 0.101 at my house. So yeah, we made it.
A
I didn't hurt my back
blizzard of
shoveling snow.
2024. Yes.
Almost got the snowblower out again.
There you go. So actually some pretty good snow coming down in Millington, Tennessee, up north of Memphis, with that cold core upper low. Looks like northern Arkansas had some. Should stay north of us. Our Arctic correspondent, Jen Naramore, cannot be on the show this week, but look who's back. Hey, Kim, welcome back. How are you?
Doing okay. How are you guys doing? It's good to see you.
Commissioner, it's an honor to have you here. Your new title is
That's
just going to be
right.
Commissioner. And Kim just froze. Her video, I called her Commissioner. She just totally froze. I mean, now you're moving again. Now we can see you.
Just can't handle that kind of pressure.
And let's see, Neil, did you and Kim survive Baltimore?
We did. It was fun. I mean, there was a lot of good talks, a lot of good it's always really cool to be in person at AMS. Like even though everyone was virtual for the pandemic, like 2 years, everyone is still like, this is the first time we're back in person, that kind of excitement. But there's a lot of cool stuff going on.
Was that a record attendance for an AMS annual meeting? It sure looked.
Was it over 7,000?
Wow.
It ended up being over 7,200. So it did end up breaking the record.
Wow.
When all was said and done, at least as I heard it. So yeah, a lot of people, this was their first time back at a meeting.
It was really spread out too. So it didn't seem like 7,000 people because the conference was like held in this convention center that had a footprint of like, I don't know, 8 square miles or something. I literally felt like I was walking like an hour back and forth between talks.
Y'all weren't in one of the hotels where they kicked all the guests out, were you?
No, that was Kim.
Oh, did that happen to you, Kim?
Oh, well, so Neil, there were 2 different things that happened. There was a hotel that actually closed during the conference. And so that was, I'm not going to name the hotel for fear of having the wrong one, but
I can name it if you want.
Well, call them out. Let's call them out. Go ahead.
It was a Home 2 by Hilton. It's not Hilton's fault. I don't know. It looked like I think the bank took it over or something, or sold it at auction during that time, and whoever bought it just shut it down, and that makes no sense to me.
Wow.
Yep. So they got the customary, you're now over at this hotel. Congratulations. I was moved out of my hotel by virtue of a pulled fire alarm at 2 a.m.
It was probably Neil. He probably did it. He's nodding in assent here.
But I didn't see anybody complaining about anything. Usually somebody's griping about something, but at least looking at the standard social channels, it looked like it went off pretty well logistically. So
not a super spreader event or anything like that.
Yeah. So Commish, great job. Neil, great job. So Bill Murray, let's bring in our guests before they run and hang up on us.
Yeah, I wouldn't want that to happen. We got some special guests tonight. We have the honor of speaking with Kathy Hufalt. She's the author of the compelling and insightful book, Death Clouds on Mount Baldy, which characterizes and chronicles the harrowing ordeal of 6 Boy Scouts that were caught in a deadly blizzard on Mount Baldy above Tucson in 1958. Now, her meticulous research and narrative brings the tragedy to life and the heroism that followed in those fateful days after. And tonight with her, she has her brother, Ralph Coltrane, who is a key figure in this because he's not only her brother, he is one of the survivors of this incident. And his firsthand experience offers us a unique and profound perspective on the events that unfolded and the lasting impact that they've had. So tonight together, we'll delve into the weather behind the event, the emotional and physical challenges, the extensive research, a rescue effort that went on for 19 days, and the lessons that were learned in the aftermath. So let's welcome Kathy and Ralph to the show. Welcome.
Yes. Hello, WeatherBrains.
We're just the weather nerds, Kathy. Y'all get to be the weather brains tonight. It's such an honor to have you. And Ralph, you have a hat on tonight that commemorates or memorializes, I guess would be a better word, the 3 young men that were lost in the blizzard on that fateful day back in 1958.
Yeah, yes, I do. I don't know if you can see the patch I have on the front there. And of course, it's the Tucson's Lost Tragedy. And then also the names of the three boys.
Wow.
Another thing that I'd like to point out is it's the mountain is Mount Wrightson. You get a lot of complaints about that. Everybody in Tucson called it Baldy. In fact, the government marker on the top of the mountain does say
Hold it up a
Baldy.
little bit higher, Ralph, if you
Okay,
can. Yeah, there we go. Mount Wrightson, that's right. And
but,
so
it is Mount Wrightson. There is another Mount Baldy in northern Arizona, but we always like to call it Baldy back then, and all the trails up there are called Baldy trails, so that's where that comes from.
And the newspaper headlines in 1958 said Mount Baldy.
So Kathy, what inspired you to write this book? I mean, had anyone written a book about it previously, or what?
No one had. And well, my brother asked me if I wouldn't look into it. And so I kind of got started with it. I interviewed over 100 people for this story. And it was quite interesting what we were able to find, because the newspapers, they covered it from one aspect, which is basically the Tucson side of it. And there was an awful lot happening on the other side of the mountain in Patagonia. The different searches that went on there that added so much more to the story and helped us to find some more meaning behind all of it.
So this
It
happened
was a funny time back then in 1958.
right?
5 years earlier, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay had conquered the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest. And in our desert town, all the boys, they wanted to conquer their own mountain. And so it happened that a boy named Mike Early decided that he wanted to go up November 15th on his birthday and reach the summit of Tucson's highest mountain, Mount Wrightson or Mount Baldy. And then he went to the local Boy Scout meeting, and I think Ralph can take over from here and explain what happened then.
Yeah, he approached the scoutmaster and asked if he could organize a hike, and the scoutmaster okayed it, and 10 boys had agreed to go on this hike. And ultimately only 6, because the 3 of the boys were at the wrong location, and the 10th boy, his parents would let him go. But we got up there too late in the day, really, to make a summit turn. It typically takes about 8 hours, and we didn't really start the trail till about a little after 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
So Ralph, what time did it get dark then? And what was the weather like when you started out on a hike?
When we started out, it was hot. It was miserably hot. I remember walking up the road to the trailhead, and I prayed for cooler weather.
It was about 80 degrees. Actually, the forecast was for it to be dry, maybe a little bit windy, but no forecast of rain, much less snow. I thought I'd show you the satellite map that was in the newspapers, and you can see that Tucson is supposed to have good weather.
Yeah, hold that up a little higher there, Kath. There we go. So how many of those AP wire photos did we look at in our younger days, James Spann?
Yeah,
of the weather map.
Yeah. That's very familiar looking.
Yeah, so it seemed like Flagstaff was forecasting bad weather.
People were wearing shorts. They were swimming here. And he has another little
the paper.
Clouds, but no rain. Yeah. And so a cold front was coming in quickly. Did you get to talk to any of the weather forecasters that were involved, Kathy, as you wrote the book?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. The only sign that the boys had that bad weather might be coming is that there was an eerie red dawn that morning. And one of the boys, Lou Burgess, he had just read this book about sailors and the warnings that they got. And if it was red at night, that was good. And if it was red in the morning, that was bad. So we mentioned something to his friend. Hey, look, we're getting this red dawn. And he says, oh, that's an old wives' tale. And don't pay any attention to it. We're going on our hike.
So the high that day was 72 degrees in Tucson, but the cold front arrived about 1 o'clock. And things turned very quickly at that point. But Ralph, talk for a minute about what it meant to be a scout then, because that's still an important thing today. Dr. Neal is very involved in scouting, and talk about what it meant to you to be a scout.
Well, it was a fun thing to do, to go camping with your friends and learn a lot of useful tools about camping and such. But yeah, mostly it's the camaraderie. Yeah, he enjoyed being with you. And this at this particular time, it'd been quite a while since we'd been on a hike. That's why this one was organized. And it was the birthday of two of the boys, Mike Early and David Greenberg. So that was pretty sad.
Now, Ralph, how old were you on that?
I was 12. I was 12 at the time, and these days, going up there, I would know that it couldn't be done. But back then, being 12, I didn't see an issue with it. We got halfway up the mountain, and the black clouds were moving in, and I just thought it was a fun thing to do. But ultimately, the temperature started dropping. Temperature dropped to 80 degrees during the night, so that's quite a drop.
And so you started out on this hike, and there was a great disparity in the ages of the boys involved, right? There were some older boys and some younger folks like you that were 12. Talk about the 6 boys that started out together.
We were all local neighborhood friends. We lived close by, and Mike Early, he was the oldest. He was 16. He was his 16th birthday, and
Lou Burgess,
he was 16 also.
He was 16 also. Yeah.
The idea was to go on the hike and spend the night there, and then the next day have a birthday party. But things changed because.
So talk about how things changed. You said black clouds rolled in, and did it begin to get colder and windy, or what did you experience?
Yeah, it did that, and but what really stopped the hike was Ronnie Sepulveda got blisters on his feet, and he couldn't go on any farther. So it was decided that Ronnie and I would wait, and the others would try to make it to the top and come back and pick us up. And Lou Burgess came back pretty quick and said, well, those 3 are going to try to make it to the top. Let's go back down. And, before we got to Josephine Saddle, it was completely dark. We had one flashlight between us, and they had one flashlight. And what had happened then, I think they were pretty close behind us, probably 20, 30 minutes behind us coming down. But they went the wrong way at Josephine Saddle. And about a half mile from there, Mike Early had tripped over a phone line that was across the trail, went down about 100 feet and broke his leg. So they were stuck for the night, and they were stuck out in the open with the storm coming. Back in those days, everybody wore cotton, and about 9 o'clock it started to rain, and so they were soaked. Midnight it turned to snow, and by daylight it was below zero. It was cold for us too, but we managed to stay dry at our campsite.
So you went back to the base camp that you had set up.
And this is kind of I spent the night then, and we had paired off actually, two and two close by, but it paired off. But that night it was just one and one. It was one from each group that was missing. So we essentially spent the night alone until about 4 a.m. when the other two boys joined me under the picnic table.
Their tents had collapsed.
Yeah, but like I say, it was cold for us too, but we managed to stay dry, and that was the difference.
Now, your dad went out. Was that on Sunday morning to work when the snow began to fall in Tucson? Because they had a record snowfall, even in the city of Tucson that next morning, right?
They got 6.5 inches downtown Tucson, which is pretty much unheard of. Yeah.
So the
It
fathers
was,
and the other family members woke up and realized that there might be a problem. How did that unfurl, Kathy?
Well, the father that had dropped them off, he wakes up to the sound of raindrops and he decides he better go up and get the boys. And he heads out. He's not expecting snow, so he's just wearing moccasins and a light jacket. But as he starts to approach the canyon, he runs into the snow and he's losing traction. So he pulls his car over and loads up the trunk with rocks. And that way he's able to make it to the lodge. And then he sets up hiking up from the lodge, looking for the boys. He has no idea where they are. And he starts calling out. And this is where he meets Ralph. Ralph, you want to continue with the story?
Yeah, that Sunday morning.
Oops, Kathy and Ralph have
The
frozen
snow
on my
was
screen. There we
The
go.
snow was about 2 feet deep.
Remember, you wouldn't
You're
weren't
fine
able
now.
to
Sorry
tie
about
your
that.
shoelaces.
I had taken my boots off during the night, and when I put them on the next morning, my hands were so cold I couldn't grab the laces. So I went down there, with the boots flopped open, basically. I got about halfway down, and that's when I ran into John Early, and the first thing he says to me is, "Where's the boys?" And that hit me pretty hard, still does, because
It still does.
I knew that his son was one of the three that were missing. And, I put my head down and looked down. That's when I noticed he was wearing moccasins. He ultimately went to Josephine Saddle, a little over 2 miles uphill wearing moccasins. So it shows the determination of a parent, looking for their child. So
He took you
that was
back to the
interesting.
lodge, right? You and your
So,
other
ultimately,
friends
I
that were there.
I took him up to the base camp and then went down to the lodge with Ronnie. There was no telephones. We found a gentleman had a shortwave radio, and he radioed someone in Kansas, actually, who radioed another person in Tucson. The person he radioed in Tucson, I ultimately worked with the railroad with some years later. That was aside. But it was late Sunday before any of the authorities made it up there. But by Sunday morning, it was too late anyway. And another interesting thing about the parents, my dad had worked for the railroad, and of course they had issues with the snow, and he got home late Sunday night, and my mother by that time knew I was okay, so she didn't say anything to him. And he wakes up the next morning and opens up the newspaper, and there's the story. So he got a little excited, and he heads up to Madera Canyon, and the sheriff's deputy says, "You can't make it. There's too much snow." And he says, "I'm from Montana. You just watch me." And
Yeah, he put the car in reverse.
and he made it up there.
Well, that sounds like a
But
Dr. Neil
when the
Jacobs
ham radio
trick.
I'm sorry, I
I'm sorry,
interrupted.
Kathy. You go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt
Well,
you.
when the ham radio network started, doing their wander around, they reached the ham radio operator in Florence, Pinell County, to the north of Tucson. And that guy turned around and called three of the most well-known searchers. And these guys decided that they were going to go for the search in the morning, and they were going to find the boys. And they thought, well, it's getting kind of cold. We're going to need an extra layer of clothing. And so they woke up the local mercantile and said, "Sell us some long johns." And he did. And then they set off at 3 or 4 in the morning expecting that they'd get there and there'd be a few inches of snow. Well, they got there and it was 2 feet that they started up with. And as they went up the mountain, it just got higher and higher and higher. And they wanted to check out this cabin where they thought the boys might be at the 8,700-foot level. And they kept going. And as they got closer and they were swapping the lead with the horses and it was getting more difficult, the temperatures were around zero. When they swapped the leads with the horses, that was to conserve things, but they got to the point where the snow reached the horses' necks and they had to stop. And they sat there, they were so close. These were Arizona guys and they weren't going to stop. And so they dismounted and they started flailing through the snow, pulling the horses, and the ranger was with them. But they made him be at the back because the ranger had not worn chaps and he was getting seriously wet. And in that fashion, they made it to the cabin. They look in the cabin. There's nobody there. They look back at the ranger and he is going into hypothermia. He's shivering and everything. So then they looked around for some wood. They didn't see any wood. There was just this cabinet in the wall, and they reached up and they tore the cabinet out of the wall, broke it up into pieces. They couldn't start a fire inside the coal stove, so they started the fire on top, and then that way they got the ranger somewhat dry. And then one of them had brought a raincoat. He went out to his horse and got the raincoat, cut it up, and they wrapped it around the guy's legs. And in that fashion, they made it all the way back down to Madera Canyon. I've got a picture of them here.
Wow. That is amazing. So meanwhile, back at the early household, they're expecting to have a birthday party, right? The mom has already made a cake.
Yes.
Talk about just the devastation that she must have felt.
Yeah, it hit her awfully hard because I got to be good friends with John Early, spent a lot of time over there, and she held on to that cake for years.
Wow.
And, she had a hard time letting go.
And so this is not something that was resolved in a day or two. How long did the search and the rescue efforts go on, and how many days was it until they found the boys?
It took 19 days to find them. Mainly because they're buried by the snow, but they were on a south-facing section, so it melted a little quicker. But it took 19 days. Actually, it was a horse. The horse that found
it.
It
Was the horse. There was a cowboy in Patagonia by the name of Mike Nagy, a larger-than-life fellow, and he was determined. And he told his wife that morning, he says, "I'm going up and get them boys." And he mounted up his Palomino and he headed on up. And the organizer sent him down this one trail. And he got a little bit down the trail, and all of a sudden the horse balks and shies, moving its head from side to side. And he says to the two soldiers that are with him, "Go down there and check it out." And they started down this slope. It's a 45-degree slope. And one of them slides and slips and rolls 100 feet down and lands on something that's a little smelly. And then he looks, and it's one of the boys. And then he calls up to Nagy, and Nagy comes down. And the signal to let others know that they had found the boys is 2 gunshots. So Nagy takes out his gun. And the word is out. And then he quickly goes over to Josephine's saddle because, as it happened, the fathers of all the boys were there waiting for word. And he tells them, he doesn't tell them who they found. He says, "You go on back down to the lodge and wait for us." And that's what they did. And you have this. And they brought the boys down.
Wow. What a tragic, tragic story. Wow. And Ralph, you mentioned that you and Mr. Early uh, stayed in contact and had a relationship. I know you had to be a great comfort to him and the rest of the family. Talk about that relationship and how it endured over the years.
Yeah, I did spend a lot of time over there. I remember one weekend helping him lay bricks in his front yard, and I noticed a couple weeks ago those bricks are still there. I found that interesting. But I made several trips, up to Josephine Saddle and also to the peak with him. Uh, so yeah, we really liked him. We liked him.
Well, I know you were a great comfort to them. What sort of psychological effects did this have for you? Ralph, you were 12. Kathy, you were 15 at the time. Talk about the long-term impacts it had on your life.
It certainly bothered me and over the years, but I could never understand, really what it was that I was feeling until there was I was giving a talk one evening and somebody raised the question and says, "Are you familiar with survivor's guilt?" Well, yeah, that was it. That was it. It's why them and not me.
Exactly. Dr. Neal, you're heavily involved in scouting, and you mentioned that this is kind of your worst nightmare. Talk about the cautions that you've issued to younger scouts about things like this.
This is a story that you constantly tell the scouts to be prepared for. And, I guess maybe I'm wondering because my kids are scouts. I was a scout. My dad was a scout, and we've kept all the handbooks as they've evolved. And I'm wondering, as horrible as this story is, are there lessons learned that are being, fed back to the scouts? Because there's a lot of things that we're teaching now that you would think it seems, pretty common knowledge, but maybe not. I spent a ton of time in the backwoods, but it's so easy now because we have SARSAT, we have radios. Even in like Antarctica, you're not disconnected from the grid. So to me, like when I look back, 40, 50, 60 years, that's scary.
I think there's two things, involved there. If we'd have had an adult along, we'd have never split up and we'd have come down sooner, I'm sure. But that's the way hikes were set up back then. But the other point is, about being prepared. I don't know how you prepare for a 80-degree drop in temperature and the rain and snow that's not projected. It reminds me of that movie with Robert Redford. What was that? Where he's up there, the mountain. I can't think of his name.
Was he Chris?
No, but anyway, it starts off when he comes upon this mountain man that's frozen with a rifle, and this guy, experienced mountain man, the reason that he died is because he had a broken leg. So
yeah,
there you are. I don't know how you survive it. You really don't.
But it was kind of key. See, all the parents, or most of the parents, thought there was going to be an adult, and in fact, Ralph was surprised when Mr. Early drove them up there and then just dropped them off and went back to town. He thought there were going to be adults as well. And they have made a rule since then that there have to be 2 adults on these hikes, that the boys aren't allowed to go out by themselves. Because I think that was really kind of key to what happened. And of course, nobody was expecting the bad weather.
It was a different time in the 50s. I know it was a different time when I was a child, even in the early and middle 70s. Parenting was not the same as it is today. We were allowed to run on our own a whole lot more. We could be gone all day, and our parents never know where we were. But fortunately, never got caught in a situation like this. Kathy, talk about the memorial that's on the mountain there at Josephine Saddle.
Well, It's actually Ralph had an awful lot to do with the memorial that's up there. He can explain. It was one of the boys' fathers, David Greenberg, had put it up there with a metal sign, and everybody's been leaving trophies or mementos or whatnot. And Ralph, he's kind of haunted by this whole story. He is on the hiking trail there every single year, and he takes care of that memorial. It completely deteriorated just a couple of years ago, and you had to redo it. Oh, I guess you've got it right
Yeah,
there.
this is what I don't have a photo of what it looks like now, but it kind of looks like that. But it fell over and went into pieces, and I put it back together, repainted it, and there was a shop in Tucson that encased it in the corner. It's acrylic, and so. And I thought I was gonna have to pay some money for that. When they found out what it was for, there was no charge. And that was kind of nice. The very first sign looked like this. This was put up by David Greenberg, the father of one of the boys that died. A little metal sign.
Wow.
There were over 750 men that came out to look for those boys. And I can tell you that afterwards, they really felt so bad that they hadn't been able to find them. That for us in Arizona, they formed then the Southern Arizona Rescue Association. And that was one really good thing that came out of this tragedy. And they have literally saved hundreds of lives in the meantime over the last 50, 60 years.
Yeah, usually there's some silver lining to every tragedy like this, and that sounds like it was one of them for sure.
But you talked about earlier about Mrs. Early and the birthday cake. And when I was doing the research, one of the people I found told me this story about how she was at the cemetery, and she noticed Mr. and Mrs. Early there in front of their son's grave, and they were sprinkling breadcrumbs on the grave and pouring water because Mrs. Early felt her son had starved to death. And so this was a symbolic way for her to feel in touch with him.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. The panelists, I know y'all have lots of things you'd like to say. James A., I'll start with you. Just an amazing, powerful story.
It is, and having grown up in Oklahoma, where we don't have mountains that you have to worry about giant weather changes on like this, but I've hiked a lot in Southern California with my cousin, and she is very much, it's like a intro course for me in hiking in mountains when I hike with her, and it's always, you never hike alone. You always respect nature, and these lessons are born from experiences like this that are just so horrific. And I think, Bill, you nailed it when you said parenting is just different now. And the look on my wife's face if I told her, yeah, kids are going to go hiking up the 8,000-foot mountain tomorrow
and spend the night.
Yeah, with no phone. Right.
And we hope they'll be back by Sunday night, maybe. But
right.
It's just a different
so
time.
Different. It's just so different.
We made a lot more probably resilient and self-reliant children back then, but unfortunately, one of the things that can come from that is a tragedy like this. So, Dr. Neal, I'm sorry, James. I didn't.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, and this happens in the national parks and probably everywhere else in the West too in the summer. The signs all over Grand Canyon on these trails that don't look that bad about heat exhaustion and heat stroke.
And Dr. Neal, you had an interesting statistic on that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, even with modern technology and my ability to track myself, whenever I go into the woods alone, even if I'm going to be gone for, just a few days, I'll always tell at least 2, if not 4 people where I'm going, what my exact itinerary is, what trails I'll be on. And I'll also print a hard copy of that and stick it on my floorboard of my truck, so that if someone finds my truck at the trailhead, they can at least And that's kind of, standard practice. But, I was having a conversation literally 2 days ago with someone who was going to be going into the woods solo. And I was looking at it from the perspective of there's a lot of weird, shady stuff that goes on in the national forest and parks, particularly at parking lots at night or these car campsites. If you're like backwoods, you're almost safer, at least from the two-legged animals. But I started looking up the statistics, and it even today in the U.S. national parks and forests, 8 people a week die. That's a shocking number. And I dug deeper, and it turns out that despite crime and other things, the number one cause of death is drowning. And so just, public service message, please learn how to swim. If you've got kids, take them to swim lessons. I can't overemphasize how important that is. Falling out of a canoe or something is by far the number one cause of death in national parks and forests.
Wow. Dr. Kim, you've been taking all of this in. What would you like to say?
I mean, there's a lot of different threads through all of this. I think a couple things. One, the statistic about what's going on modern day. It'd be interesting to dive into that more. I would be shocked if those drowning deaths weren't primarily people in boats who didn't understand that waterways are, for the most part, not managed, and they have rocks and trigs, and water is more powerful than you imagine. So in some respects, that doesn't surprise me that that's one of the bigger causes of injury and death. I think something that I'm also thinking about is just the circumstances that those boys faced, and I am wondering what, if any, closure might have come after finding them. So did you all have very much idea of what had happened to them in those intervening weeks that they had been missing, or was that just always sort of left to mystery? There'd been some, discussion about how they were found, and being in something with such a sharp relief, at the end of something like that, had that come into the conversation where there was a thought of maybe they were hiking and they had been successful for some time in making it, and then they accidentally came down a sharp cliffside, or what was that final piece of the story?
I think the final piece, you see, the family knew that the older boy had broken his leg. The newspapers didn't know it, we knew it, but we didn't know why he fell. And when I did my interviewing, I ran across this man who had been up the trail the first day. And when he got to the spot, at the time he didn't know this was where the boys had fallen. But he noticed that there was this phone line, an old abandoned phone line that had fallen down in the storm and was 3 feet up across the trail. And he put it down. He did call out to see if there was anybody there, but he didn't hear anything back. And it's there that we figure that the older boy, he's going down the trail at night. He's leading the other two. The wind is in his face. He really can't see very well. That phone line was there 3 feet up, and he tripped on it and fell down the slope. So we think that interview solves the mystery of why this boy had fallen. And then the other two, they crawled down the slope to be with him. They did a little campfire, but you know, they were 12 and 13 years old. They couldn't do a very good campfire. They had a little hatchet with them and they made a little covering, but it couldn't stop the tremendous storm that was coming their way. And they couldn't leave him. They were 11 and 12 years old. They couldn't leave him and try to make their way in the dark back to where they didn't know where they were. So it was just so tragic.
Yeah. I don't know if you can tell what the fire looked like or not. You can see the rocks around it, maybe. And you know that tells us that they got there before the weather did.
But then probably the rain came and could have extinguished the fire. And
we actually think it was the rains that did them in.
Yeah.
You know, that they probably died of hypothermia even before it started snowing, because it didn't snow until midnight and they were there for 5 hours in the rain.
You know, if we'd that night, if we'd gone right on down to the lodge immediately, it was too late. It was already too late.
Kim, did you want to ask anything else or bring out any other facets of the story?
Yeah, thank
Well,
you
for
for
me,
sharing that. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say one of the things for talk about closure. It never really closes, but at the time this happened, of course, the scoutmaster denied everything because I'm sure he was afraid of lawsuits. So at that time, initially, the Boy Scouts County Council did not call it a Boy Scout function, and that bothered me for 50 years until I gave that talk at the Boy Scout Museum in 2008 when the higher ups for the county council were there at that talk, and they came up to me afterwards and said, "We agree with you. It was a Boy Scout function." So that was nice to hear.
Yes, and after that, they came out with plaques and everything for the boys. And just 5 years ago, 300 of the scouts went up the hike to commemorate these boys that have passed. And he was there on the hike with them.
Yeah, every year I get calls from groups, and so on the anniversary, I usually take up around 30 people. But in the 60th anniversary, 250 people showed up for that hike, and they all went up.
Yeah. And they even went to the top. Even this guy went to the top.
This old man.
Well, I'm sure that they walked away from your talks, Ralph, feeling like they knew these boys. I know that just by reading the book that Kathy wrote, I feel like I knew each and every one of them, including you, Ralph. It's just a spectacular book of what it was like to live in the 1950s and what it was like to live in Tucson and the geography. And Kathy, you had to learn a little bit about the weather. You learned about the moist adiabats and the dry adiabats, and you talked about that in the book.
I tried to learn as much as I could and interview as many people as I could with respect to it, to get an idea of what was happening. Oh, I do have another picture because we talked about how it dumped 3 to 7 feet of snow on the mountains. I have a picture of some of the other cowboys that were up there. And I want you to notice their pants, their leggings. These guys were on horseback and they only were at the 7,000-foot level. Look how wet their leggings are.
Wow.
And they said they saw drifts of 7 feet as they were going around the mountain looking for the boys. It was incredible, the courage and the endurance of these searchers. And when I interviewed these guys here 50 years later, even if they had only been out a couple of hours, as I'm talking with them, you see the tears in their eyes as they're remembering their part 50 years ago in trying to find those boys. It just is incredible, really.
It's interesting to listen to your story and reflect on my own time in scouting. And I know, there were a lot of times when I was out at different scouting functions that you're more exposed to the elements. And that's part of what scouting does. And it's part of the magic of it. And it's what builds the resilience in you and also just the appreciation and awareness of nature. But it does come with risk. And I can't help but also think about, while nothing bad ever happened to me, there were a lot of severe weather events that took place when I was out camping in the far reaches of like the Chicago area. So really kind of out of Chicago in the woods. And that just happened. But there are some places where children have been less fortunate. And I think about Iowa. There was the campground that got hit by a tornado. And children did what was the best shelter available to them, but they were in a brick structure, and that structure collapsed on them, and several died as a result. And it's one of those, when you go into these environments, you are in these classically unsheltered or much less sheltered situations. So I think we just have to acknowledge, and it's so hard as a parent, that we do live in a world with some risk attached. And what we can probably do best as a weather enterprise is to try to understand where these more vulnerable populations will be and partner as much as we can so we can highlight, even if it's not necessarily the most likely forecast, if there's a possibility that there's something like, hey, maybe this cold front is going to go a little bit further south than we think, and there could be cold weather. Give someone a heads up so they can do some planning and mitigate the threat as much as possible. I almost feel like living in the modern world, we expect risk to be gone in a way that in the 50s we didn't, because there just wasn't anything that could stop it. And now it's almost like we expect it because we can see into the future. We expect all risk to be gone. But we need to also be mindful that in trying to remove that risk, we face another, and that is not knowing our world. And that has extraordinary consequences. So when all is said and done, I'm still going to send my children into the world. I'm still going to send them out scouting. I'm going to make sure that they have independence, because that's important. And those experiences for me were so formative. And yeah, there were times that I did things that could have been very dangerous, but don't we all? And we learn so much from them. And I feel so badly for those children, for what happened to them. And I can only hope and pray that you're right, that it was just so quick, honestly, that they couldn't even know what was happening. What you're describing, if anything, that could be, a hope to hold on to. And they were so young that they didn't understand. And we can just take lessons from this to move forward, yet still adventuring, but maybe trying to do so with a little bit more preparedness.
Listening to you, it reminded me, and I'd like to read you a couple of excerpts. But 3 days after the boys' bodies were found, one of the fathers sent a letter basically to his son that was printed in the newspaper. And I'd like to read you just a couple of excerpts.
Mm-hmm.
And he titles it, "To my son on his great adventure. Dear son, some people down here say you were foolish to reach for the top of the mountain, that this was a task for a grown man. I do not believe this. All kids at some time or other in their lives want to think they are grown men ahead of their time and try to reach for the stars. Some of your friends and mine tell me that you failed to reach your goal. Not so. Your great adventure led you to the very top itself. Not the mountain, it is true, but to the very heavens." And then he closes the letter with, "The hand that holds this pen falters, the ink runs dry, and the tears fall. In the language you knew and loved so well, adios, adios, your father and mother."
Wow. That is just amazing. Kim, you couldn't have put it any better. And Kathy, that is a fitting, absolute response to this whole thing. Bruce Jones, very solemn story tonight. You probably know it. 1958, 6 Boy Scouts went up Mount Wrightson above Tucson. An unexpected, unforecast blizzard came and trapped 3 of the boys. The man on the left there is one of the survivors, who came back, who luckily turned around and went back down the mountain earlier than the boys who went up trying to seek the summit before it got dark, and they were trapped in the blizzard. It's nice to have you here tonight. I wanted to introduce you to Kathy, who's written a fabulous book about it, and her brother Ralph, who is the survivor of the story. And it's been a very moving experience tonight.
I've been listening in, and I want to thank you both for sharing the story. I know how difficult it must be. And this isn't the first time that you've shared it, but these stories need to be shared and need to be told. And there's always, as mentioned by Bill and Kim, there are always lessons that we can learn from these. So I want to thank you for sharing the story. And it's just one of those things that we hope that we all learn from. But even back in the days of the Native Americans, the native boys used to engage in play warfare amongst different little tribes and clans, and riding at each other on horses and using their little coup sticks to try to touch the other one. And some of those turned out to have accidents and injuries and death. But I think that youth always wants to push those boundaries and see what am I capable of doing. And that's what life is all about. We all ask ourselves, what am I capable of doing? What can I do that I've never done before? And it's just so tragic that sometimes there's such a heavy price to pay for that. But again, thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah, just reading the book made me feel like I knew you, Ralph, and I was so grateful that you made it back. I thought your interactions with Mr. Early were just amazing. I loved reading that letter that you read to us. Kathy, I just thought that was such an incredible experience. But I admired each and every one of these boys for that bravery, for going up that mountain that day. And while I felt terrible for them, I still, I felt, grateful that they got that chance. I wish it had had a different outcome for sure. Rick Smith, you've been taking all of this in. I see you shaking and nodding your head from time to time, so I know this story is resonating with you.
Absolutely. And yeah, there's just not much to add to all the very great comments that Kim and everybody else have made. It's an amazing story. And it is amazing, like Bruce alluded to, that how even something that happened back in the 50s can still teach us and can still help us learn and help us maybe prevent things from happening like that. It's a totally different era than it was then, but certainly the story is timeless and can help us. So I just appreciate you documenting it, and I can't wait to read the book. I mean, it just sounds really fascinating, and I know it wasn't easy to do that, and I appreciate the hard work it must have taken to do that. So thank you all for being here.
And James A., you made a couple of profound statements that just have to be shared. A lot of nights you've got funny things to say. Tonight it's kind of all serious, but share any of those profound pieces of wisdom you mentioned in the chat.
This has touched me deeply. It's not expected, but it's just kind of normal when things happen to adults and older people, and that is awful. But when youths die, when kids die like this, it just robs us of the future, and not only their dreams and aspirations, but their families' dreams and aspirations for what those kids would bring to the future. And it's just doubly awful. It's terrible.
Yeah, 3 Wednesday nights ago, I heard my wife upstairs go into hysterics. I could not have even imagined what could have upset her so badly. And so I ran upstairs, and she said, that one of our children's best friends had shot and killed himself. And, it just was like, here's a child that I would expect to come through the door at any minute, while we're doing WeatherBrains, wave. He just walks in our house. And, you think, what in the world could he have been going through? And what could I have done differently? And this child that I saw each and every, at least every week. And I just got in the car and drove over there to be with his parents because, I'd lost a child, in 2012 at the age of, 26, not quite, as young as some of these young men, but I had been through that experience, and it was interesting to just be empowered by God to know exactly what to say in that situation, because he was such a treasure to me. And if I had done, if I could have done anything to turn that around, I would have. But I could look them in the eye and say, you guys were great parents, and you coached our children, and you led them, and we trusted our kids with you. And, we can't understand this. We'll never be able to explain it or understand it. And that sort of tragedy was just beyond. And what you just said, James, resonates with me so much because, so many things that young man could have been. And now his family is never going to have those experiences with him. I can't even imagine. It's made me a lot more cautious in the last, few years, to make sure, because I can't even imagine going through it again. It's just unbelievable, all the time and love and everything you invest in these lives. And to lose them for any reason is just soul crushing. So thank you for saying that. Anything else you wanted to add, James A., and then Dr. Neil? Neil, you mentioned something very important there, uh,
Yeah,
in the chat.
I can't imagine what it's like being a parent myself to lose a child. And maybe this is a dumb thing to say because I've had a couple of friends who've lost parents recently, and in a bizarre way to console them, my thoughts are, be glad that that's the order it happened instead of your parents having to deal with your loss. But I'm gonna make both my boys read it. One's a bear and one's a weebelo. And I think this is an important thing for them to learn. But even today, I do a fair amount of risky stuff, and my mom is pretty uptight. She's like, I want to know exactly when you're going in the woods or out in the ocean or whatever you're doing. And as soon as you get cell service, you just text me and let me know you're okay. And, it's, I ask her about it, and she's like, there's probably a lot of ways that you could die, but at least if it happens in one of these, I'll know that you were doing something that you really liked. And it was pretty exciting and adventurous. And, I think, at least these boys, it's so tragic, but honestly, if I had to go out, I'd want to go out on the side of a mountain or something.
Well, Dr. Neil, you're going to be able to let those boys read this book, and they're going to be amazed by it. It's so accessible and well written, and they're going to feel like they know those boys at the end of this book. So I think that's a very, very wise decision. Dr. Neil, if you would just stop picking up copperheads for me, that would just be my one request. No more copperheads. No more TikTok videos of of you picking up copperheads in the North Carolina mountains, if you don't mind. So, James Spann, I know this show means a lot to you too. I'll turn it over to you unless anybody else has anything, and let you say or ask anything you want to ask of Ralph or Kathy.
That's our working show title, by the way. Stop picking up copperheads. That is our working show title. No, listen, I think what we've talked about tonight is what's in the reason I do this. All that matters is how weather affects people. And we're here, the ultimate goal, it's to mitigate loss of life. In my position is that every human life is precious. Every human life. It doesn't matter if you're as old as me or if you're a 8, 9-year-old, 10-year-old boy. And that's what motivates me. That's why often I memorize the names of people that die in tornado events. I did a talk in Huntsville this past Saturday at the Rocket City Weather Fest about March 25th, 2021. One of the first things I did, let me show you the 6 people that died on this day. Let me show you who they were and some of the things about them. And so hearing the stories were just fantastic tonight. Hey, Ralph, I got one question. How do you stay in such good shape?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I play a lot of golf, and it reminds me of an interesting story. When we were doing this book, we noticed that the sign was put up by Troop 249, and we could never find any record of 249. And I play a lot of golf, but this particular group on Monday, I'm this automatic markup. Every Monday, I'm going to play, I'm going to play, I'm going to play. And I walked there one day, and they said, "You're not signed up. You can't play." So I just joined these 3 guys and went out, and we get about halfway around and started talking about this story. And come to find out, one of the guys I'm golfing with, his dad put up the sign.
Really?
What are the odds of that?
Wow. So do you still hike, Ralph?
I do. For sure, every November I take a group up, and usually maybe a couple more times during the year I go up there. I've been to Josephine over 100 times. I've been to the top about 25. Mostly I hike around the golf course these days.
I understand. So for people that want to buy the book, what's the best way? How can they do that? This is your chance to plug away, so go.
Oh, okay. Death Clouds on Mount Baldy. It's on Amazon. I guess that would be the best spot to find it.
Yeah, I actually bought it and then I lost it, and I had to buy it on Kindle so I could read it again right before the show. So you can get it in Kindle or you can get it in a paperback version.
That's right.
Awesome. In the next course, my next question, in the way I read books, I listen to them. So is there an audio version?
No, I'm afraid there isn't.
Oh, there needs to be.
It was
that would be so perfect.
Yeah. You'll have to read it or wait for the movie.
Now that's true. There was a little filmmaker out that was a Boy Scout about that same time, about your same age, wasn't he, Ralph?
Yes. Well, actually, Michael Blake of Dances with Wolves, he did a review for me on my book, and he was going to write the screenplay, but he died. So unfortunately, that didn't happen. But Ralph was 12 years old at the time. And this was the story of the year in Arizona. And there was another 12-year-old in Phoenix, Arizona, by the name of Steven Spielberg.
Ooh.
Now,
he knows
the story, but I have no way of getting the book to him because I tried. His group just sends it back with a nasty note. So all of you out there, if you've got any ideas on how to get a hold of Stephen, I'm sure he'd be appreciative because all the Boy Scouts in Arizona, they're pretty much tuned into this story. So I'm sure he would be too if he knew about it. There you have your homework.
It will be an Academy Award
Kim's the
winner.
commissioner. She ought to know him. I mean, Kim knows everybody. Come on, Commish.
I'll get right on that, guys.
Yeah, I knew it. There you go. But Kathy and Ralph, thank you. You told us you'd give us an hour. You've been here for an hour and 15 minutes. But thank you so much. Fascinating story. And again, it touched all of us, I think. But thank you so much. It was a marvelous experience for all of us. We loved hearing from both of you. And thanks to both of you. And God bless you. Thank you so much. All right, so we're going to pause here and hear from Tony Rice, and we will get Jen's This Week in Tornado History, and we will come back and talk with Bruce Jones. I'm so excited Bruce is back on. I can't wait to talk with Bruce. I got some good stories to tell. We're going to do a weather roundup. We're going to talk about, I need to talk about Neil about this northeastern snowstorm. Everybody on the weather tweeter, they're griping about the models. Models have shifted. I've never seen models shift this much in a snowstorm. But anyway, much more coming up. Hang on as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
Well, we're less than 2 months away from the total solar eclipse on April 8th, 2024. That brings to mind the last one that swept across the United States on August 21st, 2017. So how do the two measure up against each other? Both began in the Pacific Ocean and ended in the Atlantic. The path in 2017 stretched over 8,500 miles. In 2024, it adds another 500. Each solar eclipse, they're just a little bit different. So let's look at a point where these two intersected near the lucky residence of Carbondale, Illinois. Observers there in 2017 were treated to 2 minutes and 40 seconds of totality, the period of time when the sun is completely covered by the moon. 2024's eclipse brings over 4 minutes of totality. Why the difference? 2017's path was a little more than 70 miles wide, while 2024's is about 125 miles wide. So plenty of places to go to see the eclipse. Seasoned eclipse watchers, they try to get as close to the center of the path as possible, which makes sense if you think about it. The moon's nearly circular, so its shadow is going to cast an elongated circle along the curved surface of the Earth. And just like cutting a thin slice of cake, you're going to maximize that slice by cutting through the middle, not the edges. Looking across 5 millennia of eclipses, 2024's is pretty typical. Most total eclipses are around 80 to 120 miles wide, and they last around 4 minutes. Thinking back to the annular eclipse that swept from Oregon to Texas last October, again looking across that history of eclipses from 2000 BCE to 3000 CE, annular eclipses have varied from barely a half mile wide, lasting about a second, to nearly 900 miles wide and lasting over 12 minutes. Thinking back to the annular eclipse of May 30th, 1984, it swept from Louisiana to Virginia, passed through downtown Atlanta, very close to New Orleans, Montgomery, Alabama, and Greenville, South Carolina. But the next person I meet who remembers this will be the first. Why? The path was less than 5 miles wide, so not many people experienced it. Now, April's eclipse, it could be the most experienced and likely will be the most photographed in history, because its path lies within a half a day's drive of the majority of the population of the US and Canada. Elsewhere in the sky, WeatherBrains listeners in the upper Midwest should take a moment tonight and tomorrow night to look up for Aurora, a pair of Earth-directed coronal mass ejections prompted NOAA to issue a geomagnetic storm watch through Wednesday. Check swpcnoaa.gov for the latest. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, 3 tornadoes were confirmed on February 16th, 1995, all in Alabama. The strongest was a devastating F3 that tracked 14 miles through parts of Coleman and Marshall counties. This tornado began about 3 miles west of Joppa just before 5 a.m. Central Time. It traveled to the east-northeast through the town, across Alabama Highway 69 and into Marshall County, just southwest of Arab. The tornado moved across the south side of that town. 77 dwellings and 6 businesses were destroyed in Coleman County. The Joppa Elementary School was destroyed. 80 dwellings and 6 businesses were demolished in Marshall County. There were 130 injuries reported in this event and 6 fatalities. 1 death occurred in a home and the rest in mobile homes. 4 of the deaths were in the Arab area and 1 in Joppa. A pregnant woman was severely injured in her mobile home and was sent into labor early, and sadly the baby died at birth. In the rubble of a damaged trailer park, a baby was found unharmed. Fireman Robert Reynolds was quoted in the newspaper as saying, "We found a 1-year-old baby under 2 trailers. He was sitting there, not making a sound." Learn more about this tornado event on our website, tornadotalk.com. Join the American Meteorological Society's Weather Band at amsweatherband.org to connect with weather enthusiasts all over the world, plus 10,000 plus members of the AMS. Swap stories and data, join photo contests and interactive webinars, or test your trivia knowledge. Full membership is just $12 per year. And don't forget to join WeatherBand February 29th and March the 1st from noon to 4 for the annual virtual Jamposium. As requested by WeatherBand members, the Jamposium will cover topics from climate change and severe weather to science communication, citizen science, and the April 2024 total solar eclipse. Go to amsweatherband.org to get started.
So much to unpack here. Number one, that tornado that Jen talked about caused the Huntsville National Weather Service to be resurrected. James Spann, did you remember that?
Yes, if Brian Peters was on the show, he could tell a long story about that. But yes, that changed a lot of things. It sure did. But that was the beginning of the process that brought a Weather Service office to Huntsville.
Yeah, somehow the Weather Service in Birmingham that night missed that tornado and didn't warn for it, and there was a huge outcry back in 1995 about that. Second thing, the CMEs that are coming toward Earth, I hear a new thing we have to worry about are cannibal CMEs. This one main one is going to suck up all the other ones and become a giant CME, and we're going to have a strong geomagnetic storm. James Spann, how do they keep coming up with things that we have to worry about like this? Is there somebody that just sits down in a basement somewhere and comes up with these things, or
it's some pinhead somewhere? Yes.
So anyway, we are glad to have Bruce Jones back with us tonight, and Bruce is in Colorado at the Colorado Emergency Managers Conference. Bruce, talk about the role of the emergency manager and weather preparedness and how they feel about NOAA Weather Radio, because you're the national emissary for not only Midland, but for NOAA Weather Radio in general, and we are all your acolytes.
Oh, well, thanks very much. It's it's funny. I've been talking about NOAA Weather Radio for the last 45 years or something like that. Simply because when I started in radio, I told the listeners, now, we'll do the wall-to-wall severe weather coverage on our radio station here, but we can't wake you up at 2:00 in the morning. You got to have a device that'll do that. And there's this, it was relatively new at the time. There's this new gizmo called a weather radio, and you should buy one of those and plug it in, and then it'll tell you that it's time to turn on KFRU radio in Columbia, Missouri. So my advocacy on behalf of this goes back a long ways, but it's primarily because radio frequency communication works really, really well. The Voyager 1 spacecraft that we sent out back in the 1970s is, I think, currently 12 or 13 billion miles from Earth, and they can still communicate with it because they send a radio beam up there, and the spacecraft 12 billion miles away picks up the radio signal and sends another one back to us. Now, the Kansas City Chiefs, they won
that.
They won that big
Dynasty
game
right now.
So Wednesday, they're having this big parade in downtown Kansas City. And I've already told everybody that will listen, don't expect your cell phone to work down there, because you're going to have 500,000 or 1 million people down there on that parade route, and there's going to be no cell phone bandwidth available. So this is another situation where radio still gets through. You could have a jillion people down there, and that doesn't suck up a radio wave. Everybody could have a radio receiver and they would get it. So the strength of radio and the NOAA Weather Radio Network is that these signals travel a long ways. Anybody can pick it up, and it's instantaneous communication to the masses, millions of people at a time. It's only, the size of the audience is only dictated by the number of people that take advantage of getting a receiver.
It's still my favorite purchase in the last 50 years. I went to Pizzitz department store in 1976 and bought one of those little cube weather radios that had the push button on it.
Yeah.
And I thought I had died and gone to heaven when it finally came on the air in Birmingham in November of 1976. I'd been able to hear it at the beach because Mobile had one, and I would take my little Patrolman 6 radio with me and listen to the NOAA Weather Radio broadcast. They would talk about the synopsis and the nearshore waters and the small craft advisories, and I was in heaven, Bruce. And I think you got a special for WeatherBrains listeners that have been missing you for the past several months. We get 17 glorious weeks of you this spring.
Oh,
but tell us about that offer.
Yeah, you know, I first of all, I would appreciate it if you would spread the word to everybody you know. You need to have multiple ways of getting your warnings. Cell phones are great because we all have them. Outdoor sirens are great when you're outdoors. The TV stations have never done better weather forecasting and wall-to-wall coverage than they're doing today. It's just phenomenal. But you have to take advantage of all these modalities of getting these warnings, all these different modes of getting them. And NOAA Weather Radio is still a very, very important one. So if you're a listener to WeatherBrains, we have our special for you, 25% off weather products and accessories at midlandusa.com. And you get the 25% off by using this promo code. And the promo code is SPAN25. That's SPANN 25, as in James Spann. The SPAN25 promo code will get you 25% off of a weather radio purchase. Now, we have Valentine's Day coming up. We have Mother's Day coming up. We have Father's Day coming up. But most importantly, we have tornado season coming up. So please spread the word. Everyone needs to have multiple ways to get warnings. And if you're a fan of WeatherBrains, please take advantage of this opportunity. Go to midlandusa.com, use the promo code SPAN25, SPANN25, and you'll get 25% off of a weather radio purchase at midlandusa.com.
And this is what you need to do. Okay, listen, there's a good chance if you're listening to this or watching this, you probably have a weather radio. But I will assure you, there's somebody in your neighborhood, there's somebody in your family that doesn't have one. And what you need to do is to pass this information on to them. Tell them, go to the website, get 25% off, and kind of be an evangelist, because ultimately this could save somebody's life. I mean, I was, Bruce, at an event recently, a big crowd. I asked you, all right, if you've got a weather radio, raise your hand at your house. I'd say one out of 10, 10%, which is unbelievable. So we've got some work to do. So again, what you can do is help us spread the word and get a weather radio. Every home, every business needs one. Cell service can stop working, and it often does during a tornado emergency. And this, like I say, I'm an old ham radio guy. Goodness gracious, I'm an RF guy from way back when. And I love this RF network. It is old school and it is good school. So, Bruce, it's great to have you back, and can't wait to work with you in coming weeks as we attempt to get more weather radios in the hands of Americans that need them. So thanks a lot for your time, and thanks a lot for being on the show here. All right, we're trying to shorten the show a little bit.
We're going to fail miserably tonight.
Yeah, well, that's okay. That's okay. But really quickly on the weather roundup side. So Neil, what's the deal with this computer model shift everybody's griping about up in the Northeast?
I don't know what they're talking about. Like, I've been watching the models. The 6Z run on February 7th shifted west and had a coastal nor'easter. That was a 156-hour forecast. And it's been locked on to a nor'easter ever since. The only thing that's really changed has been the intensity. And there's a trend. Like, if you look at the trend, the negative tilt has gone less negative, more positive. The 540 line's getting not pulled down as far, so it's not going to be as bad of a snowstorm. But the model locked on to this nor'easter event like 5 days ago. And if you're a forecaster and you're looking at the model and you're not looking at successive trends in the runs, then you're doing it wrong.
There you go. You heard it from the numerical weather prediction czar of the world right here. And I have not been looking at it as intently as I should, but I've just been, I look at the weather Twitter and everybody's griping about it. So you heard it from the man himself. I will say down here, Bill Murray, it underperformed a lot of, severe weather potential that never happened. Severe weather was a no-show in Alabama and Mississippi, and we had more of a flood event. We had some really serious flooding in parts of the state, but we hope our friends in the Northeast have a better time with their forecast up there as it affects New York City and Boston. So, Neil, how much does New York City get? How much does Boston get?
I think whatever they thought they were going to get probably a day or two ago, you probably cut those numbers in half. I mean, they're still going to get a decent amount of snow, but it's not going to be measured in feet or anything.
And hopefully more than what James Adelot get. What would you get again? 1/10 of an inch?
Yeah, the official snow total for Tulsa is 0.1, 1/10 of an inch. So, yeah.
Rick, did you see a snowflake in Norman?
I can't unmute. It snowed for over 12 hours here straight. Just the most beautiful, perfect snow. You could almost hear it hitting the ground in some cases. It was 34 degrees and the ground was over 40 degrees. And I drove to work this morning with no trouble. So it's just, you couldn't ask for
perfect
anything better.
snow.
The only thing that made it better was a little bit of thunder, but we got probably 2 inches here, and we did have an 8-inch total down in southwest Oklahoma. So the closer we got to the event, the forecast really kind of zeroed in, and I think we did a really good job with the overall forecast. But yeah, people got some really, really good snow out of this.
These stupid stripy, cool to call them snow events are a nightmare. We had a 6-inch total about 15 miles from downtown Tulsa, and downtown probably got 1/10 of an inch. So,
All right. Well, let's kind of morph into picks of the week. We're going to go around the horn. Everybody's going to share something that is weather related. And Kim, let's begin with you. Give us something really good.
Sure. Well, reflecting on everything that our guests gave us this evening, I found a really lovely blog called Right as Rain, put up by the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine, and it's about taking risk. And I thought, after what we heard tonight, it's so easy to hear these stories and think about, oh gosh, how do I act to protect myself, my children, and so on. And I mean, it's such a human thing in the face of risk. We are so risk averse in so many circumstances. But this little blog I'm going to share makes a point about the importance of taking some risk in life, and that you do miss out. That there's a loss from not taking risk. So that needs to be weighed against what you could be exposed to by actually taking a risk, and all the psychological benefits of just pushing yourself, pushing your boundaries, getting to know yourself in the world. So thought we could all use something a little bit like that this evening.
We could. Excellent choice. Thank you, Kim. I stole my pick from Rick Smith. He shared a link to the National Storm Chaser Summit, that rolling fort panel we discussed at the top of the show, the YouTube video of that. So I can't wait to watch that. So that'll be my pick of the week. All right, Neil, give us something good.
So my pick of the week in my ongoing quest to find cooler ways to plot boring meteorological data was a website for the RForge R project. So I'm not familiar with R. I'm pretty much a grads NCL person. Finally weaned myself off Gempack. But the blog post here is hilarious because the authors of this blog post are like, this is everything not to do when it comes to color schemes. And then they decide to use INSEP as the example. And it turns out that it wasn't just completely random, that the actual authors of this blog published a paper in BAMS back in 2015. The title of the paper is Somewhere Over the Rainbow: How to Make Effective Use of Colors in Meteorological Visualizations, by Stauffer et al. And I'm going to provide the link to the RForge project, which has a link to the BAMS paper in it. It's very good. More people should read it because we're still struggling with this issue, apparently.
I will say, being with Weather Service and NSEP, this plea has been heard to some degree. So there's a movement internally to standardize our color usage, at least to do things like deal with color blindness and all of those like very fundamental issues that the paper raises and that your article raises. So hopefully that will translate down the line in a couple of years to at least friendlier use. If we're going to use some of these color schemes, at least we can use specific hues that do more ordinal, nice things and have nice properties for more people.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Neil. Rick Smith, what you got for us? What's your pick of the week?
People in the weather community may have missed this. This was a minor thing that happened, but yesterday during the Super Bowl, the Twisters trailer premiered, the new Twisters movie that comes out July 19th. You probably missed it. You probably didn't see it. So just in case you don't know what I'm talking about, I do have the link. My pick of the week is the link to the full 2-minute trailer. If you just watched the Super Bowl, you only saw the 30-second one. You have to watch the 2-minute one too. And we could talk for weather Twitter is just, this has been one of the big topics today. We got 5 months to talk about it. There's no rush, but yeah, that's my pick of the week.
Good deal. I've not seen it. I didn't watch Super Bowl, but I'll watch the long version, and we'll put the link up on weatherbrains.com. James A., give us a good pick.
Well, if you saw the little dust up between Travis Kelce and his head coach Andy Reid during the early in the Super Bowl, Twitter filled up with people making memes of that. And Pat Hyland, who is a forensic consulting meteorologist in Norman, did one where he basically has Kelce yelling at Andy Reid saying, the survey results are preliminary until the National Weather Service releases the official rating. And I thought, that's awesome. Brilliant.
That's awesome. That's outstanding. Great. All right, Bruce Jones, welcome back. Give us a good pick of the week.
Hey, I'll send you a link from the LA Times, and I hope it works. There is a Mount Baldy in Los Angeles County, and the LA Times just recently published an article about how dangerous that mountain is and how many people die walking up Mount Baldy. You can see it from Pasadena, from Riverside. It's just one of those mountains right up there. There's a lot of TV towers and stuff up there, but it's very dangerous. You've got hypothermia problems. You've got heat problems in the summertime. And then the footing up there can be a little bit sketchy. And people come up to the bottom of it and think, oh, it's going to be a friendly little walk. I'm in LA County. What can go wrong? But there's a Mount Baldy there that actually is a rather dangerous mountain. They're trying to get the word out that people need to go up with other people, not by yourself, and you need to be prepared.
Wow, indeed. All right, great pick. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, James, I'm going to pick the AMS Weatherband Jamposium. I know Jen has it in the commercial, but that's going to be a really fun event. February 29th, March 1st. If you're not a member of the band already, you need to be. Just an amazing show tonight. Just talking to Kathy and her brother on Friday of last week, I knew that it was going to be a very moving experience, and it was. Thank you for being, as reverential as everyone was tonight, and just an amazing experience. Andy McPhee is going to join us next Monday night. He's going to talk about the Donora, Pennsylvania death fog. A lot of great things came out of that. Of course, it was a terrible incident at the time, but he's written a fabulous book about it. We're going to talk to him about that event. And then on February 26th, I have a treat in store for everyone. Tom Grazoulis and his wonderful wife, Doris, are going to join us. We were going to do a test Zoom call a week ago, and we got on that thing, and an hour and 45 minutes later, we were still talking. And I wish I'd recorded it, because the stories he told that night, I wrote them all down. I'm going to make sure to ask him about them all again, because he is just a font of amazing stories. And his dear wife is adorable too. And they're going to make such a cute couple. And we're probably going to have a 3-hour show that night. So I'm sorry that we're trying to shorten things, but this is going to be an experience, guys.
Well, hey, anyone who's seen that book knows what's coming. We're not going to have a short show with someone who writes something like that.
No, it's going to be fabulous. So I cannot wait. But that's just what's coming up in the next 3 weeks, James.
Master Control, just be ready for that. For those that don't know, we are taken live on television here in this market on the digital weather channel, but on the other platforms, we can talk all night if we want to, I guess. But listen, we do need to wrap this one up tonight. If you're new here, we typically record the show Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central. And you can watch it live on the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen, however you consume this. We thank you. If you want to get in touch with us, and we did not do the email of the week because Jen was out, we'll come back with that next week. But our email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. We'd love to hear from you. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to see
You
y'all
bet.
again.
Bruce,
Bye.
good to have you back.
Bye.